Hello everyone, and welcome to the semi-final match between Cubit and SorenJohnson. Interestingly enough, Masquerade turned on, even though I didn't trigger it. I don't really know what's going on with that. This is going to be game number 1 in this best of 3, and today we're actually going to be playing on Beta 3 in Reveal Map mode, rather than in Beta 2. Beta 3 coming up very, very soon in Offworld Trading Company's development. And so it'll be interesting to see what kinds of different strategies these players choose to utilize with the variety of changes that are going into play. And we can cover those as they come up throughout this match. Reveal map mode, obviously the first big change that we're seeing right now being used, right? Because we can see that the players will gain a significant amount of debt if they choose to found their colony, or if and when they choose to found their colony. They can wait until that amount of debt turns to 0, but that might give up the potential best spot on the map to their opponent if they choose to found a bit earlier. We can see that Cubit decided to found well before SorenJohnson did, maybe claiming his ideal spot on this map. We can see he's got decent access to iron and aluminum and silicon and water and carbon. All these things very nearby in reasonable quantities as well. Makes sense why Cubit would choose to found in this general area. Just solid access to a bunch of different resources. Soren, on the other hand, he has founded as scientific down in the southeastern corner of the map. He's chosen to rely more on this aluminum and silicon combination. He'll be able to use that very, very easily for electronics production if the game moves toward the late stages. And he has decent access to water, but not fantastic. Still very interesting to see, though, going scientific and then having to send his metal mines way over to the western side of the map in order to really upgrade his colony at all. And it'll be interesting to see if he gets punished for that at all as we move into the later stages of the game. Thankfully for Soren, he was able to buy up the steel that he requires. Cubit maybe not responding in the best fashion, not purchasing steel for himself, things of that nature. And so Soren will be able to hit HQ level 2 very quickly. He'll be rewarded with an extra claim still for founding later. And he'll likely be able to get himself into a fairly good spot fairly easily. Once again, though, this iron's so far out, it's going to be a little while still before he can truly get steel production online, given that both of these players have completely destroyed aluminum's value. Right. Claim auction going out. Once again, kind of expect that 20 to 28,000 range for this. Don't really know where these players exactly will value it. Looks like Cubit doesn't want to push to the 28, which is interesting. Just going to let it go over to SorenJohnson for 24. That should be well worth an extra claim. Soren still having 4 claims left available. Having already hit HQ level 2, we'll have to see what he can manage to do with those in order to take an advantage off of having level 2 so early. Come on. Unused tile and 4 claims left. We can really see the downside right now of having established that iron production so far away, because Soren hits that upgrade button the moment it's available and then does nothing for hours and hours of game time, right? Because he just didn't have the materials. Maybe a bit of a misstep by Soren there, consuming just a little bit of extra debt that he really didn't have to. That said, we should point out that Soren at 36,000 debt, Cubit at 44, pushing up to 45 in just a moment. So a slight edge going to Soren there. No big surprise. He did found later and get that slightly cheaper founding location because of that. Alright, guys. I guess we can talk about the biggest change we'll see now that we're on the next version of the game, the Beta 3 version, is that a lot of these prices have started a lot higher, so steel is super valuable still, despite the fact that these players are making significant quantities of it at this point. That should drop fairly soon. Glass is significantly more expensive, so Soren might be very easily able to abuse the amount of silicon he has access to maybe tank silicon's price and then make some glass for himself. All that kind of thing is a definite possibility. And generally speaking, we don't necessarily see the game move much faster in the initial stages, because even though prices have increased and it's a bit easier to make money in the early stages of the game, Stock prices have also increased on average, especially in the 1v1 scenario. We can see both these players having around a $9 stock price. So the game may push to much later stages than we were seeing with our matches in Beta 2. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on and see how these players kind of adjust to that general idea of the late game being a bit more viable at this point. Should be noted that Soren has purchased 40 glass, the exact amount he requires to reach his upgrade, which he's going to do just now, whereas Cubit has actually purchased 92, making sure to stockpile a significant amount, almost enough to jump up to HQ level 4 if he wishes, and certainly enough to establish food production once he's hit HQ level 3 if he chooses to go that route. So just a bit more of that initial valuable building material available for Cubit at this stage. So though, claim auction, this one, I feel like this one should be bid reasonably high. It's a 2-water tile, right? Either of these players could make decent use of this, if not absolutely amazing. You would think if Soren wanted one, he would have bothered to throw down his water pump though. And so I wouldn't be too surprised if this goes either way. Should likely go for a bit higher than $14,000, but that's where it's going to stop. One more claim on over to Soren. That puts Cubit... Oh man, that puts Cubit already 2 claims down once we've counted in his expansive bonus. Not really where you want to be as an expansive player, and that's not even counting in the fact that Soren has managed to upgrade again and committed more tiles to more locations. But we'll just have to see how it all plays out. Should be noted that Cubit was a bit faster into the silicon than Soren was, if I spotted that correctly, and he's gathering a lot more, so he'll get more of a benefit off of this high silicon price. And if he chooses to sell off a significant amount of it, or if he just chooses to stockpile it, either way, he will be able to move into glass production perhaps a bit more easily than one would expect. Cubit is using that spare glass he had stored up to go ahead and make that move into farms. No big surprise, farms should be worth plenty of money right now, $38 a piece with no adjacency bonuses. Going to be one of the more valuable things available on this map. Soren, on the other hand, moved into electrolysis reactors. Also very, very valuable. These buildings much closer to each other with the patch changes. Even though the electrolysis reactor makes more stuff, it generally begins less valuable these days. No, it makes more stuff? I think I said more stuff. Sorry guys, it's early. I'm not doing so hot. And so, even though the farm being more valuable and costing significantly less glass brings the 2 buildings more in line, it's much nicer to see overall. Power Surge from SorenJohnson is going to go ahead, by the way, and shut down most of Cubit's food production. He chooses to commit 1 more farm after it in order to guarantee he will still have access to some of that valuable income. And so that should work fairly heavily in his favor, in Soren's favor for the time being, just kind of shutting down some of Cubit's income and making sure he can stay a step ahead. Should be noted, though, that Soren has managed to develop a significant amount of debt from taking these auctions. Also, not as heavy of a committal to power as Cubit made, Cubit dropping 3 solar panels to Soren's 2. And so Soren's stock price is now noticeably lower than Cubit's, still up above $8 for the time being. And so he's not going to die anytime soon, but we'll have to see if that continues. If Soren allows interest to build up a bit more than Cubit does, things of that nature could shut him down a bit later in the game, and we'll have to see what kind of transitions he can make to compensate. As we can see though, Soren moving away from the steel, which is currently only worth about $20, and into glass production instead, worth significantly more. Doesn't have to pay that high silicon price from all these solar panels that came down. He's put himself into a fairly good spot, all things considered. Also, another power surge down onto Cubit's farms, just guaranteeing that Cubit really doesn't have access to a whole lot of money. Claim auction comes out again. Shouldn't be any real surprise. A lot of claim auctions we've been seeing lately for whatever reason. I expect this once again, 24, 28,000, that range, right? You would really hope Cubit would be willing to push this to 24. There it is. Now, does Soren go for 28, or is he too concerned about his debt right now to go that far? He is. Gonna let it go to Cubit for 24. Cubit goes ahead and secures a little more water production in response to the shortage that came down earlier. Certainly a reasonable decision. So both players just gathering a fair amount of that very, very, very valuable water for the time being. Cubit, as night falls, goes ahead and makes the transition into silicon, That price was pushed very, very high by all the solar panels that came down in combination with the early game shortage. And so this will be worth a lot of money to him for the moment. And then if he gathers up a whole lot of it, he'll be able to go ahead and move back into solar panels somewhere if he desires. He could maybe move into some glass production again to kind of go along and counter Soren's glass production. We'll just have to see exactly what Cubit decides to do with these tiles, which are all making him $150 to $300 a piece. Soren is going to be the first one to HQ level 4. No big surprise there. He has been shutting down Cubit's production, shutting down his income. Cubit may be struggling a bit in this game. Interestingly enough, Cubit, the moment day comes again, goes ahead and throws back down solar panels. You have to wonder about this one, but I think it's partially in response to the fact that there's a solar flare out right now, possibly losing some money in all of those transitions because this cost him 240 silicon to rebuild. But with a solar flare down, you really don't want to be missing out on potentially paying your debt. So he will go ahead and commit back into those solar panels and even EMPs out Soren's to try and make sure that he gets the better bonus out of this solar flare. Upgrade does come down for Cubit, just running a little ways behind Soren at this point. Maybe as black market gets a bit more expensive, he'll be able to hold on a bit better and catch up a bit more. He's going to move back into steel production. Steel's price has jumped up to $103. And so that's going to be a very, very nice move for him. I mean, $93 to $150 per tile, just making steel. That's absolutely where you want to be, especially if you choose not to sell it for any more than maybe the glass you need to acquire. You can see Cubit storing up his steel for the time being and simply selling down his food and likely his water. Just selling down the resources that Soren is also producing, not selling down steel yet, is exactly the kind of move we want to see. Makes it hard for Soren to hit HQ level 5 while hurting his income on everything he is trying to use to make money. Upgrade available for Cubit if he wishes to take it. Not available for Soren. Soren having moved into this patent lab. We can see a very similar decision making out of Soren though. He has a large stockpile of glass that he is choosing not to sell, as that would make it much easier for Cubit to move to an upgrade. Cubit has also, let's see, not purchased any stock yet, whereas Soren may be getting a little bit antsy. Says, my stock price is just a little bit lower for the time being. I'm going to start buying into myself, and then I'm going to start trying to purchase into my opponent. A bit early, maybe, to be making some of these moves, but we can see that Soren has a significant stockpile, but now he's kind of committed all of it that direction, and a lot of his resources are starting to make less money. His glass still is, by far, his best source of income. These farms and these reactors doing all right. Doing a good job at almost 100 apiece, certainly outpacing Cubit's steel after he sold some of it down, likely to defend himself by purchasing some of his own stock. One just has to wonder who's gotten themselves into the better position at this point. Aluminum, by the way, is on up to $85. So Soren, it looks like, will have a lot of trouble upgrading from the position he's gotten himself into. $70,000 right now for Soren to upgrade. Not really the kind of move you want to make. So if Cubit can hold on long enough and go ahead and make the moves into his own stock and survive, he should be in a fairly good spot. Should be noted though, with all these random water shortages that have been hitting this game, I think we've seen 3 so far this game. It's getting very difficult for Cubit to make money off of the food and off of the potential reactors, and so instead he's kind of just rushing straight to an Offworld off the back of all of this steel production, actually going ahead and committing it somewhere. Definitely a good decision on Cubit's part, but he's going to need to maneuver out of it. He's going to need to maybe be in plenty of silicon, be in plenty of power to make sure he can pay off some of his debt, and maybe even have committed to another aluminum tile at some point. Would have been a nice decision for him. Should also be noted, neither of these players getting into chems right now. Chems would be an absolutely fantastic move. We can see net revenue on a single chem lab right now is $65 because chem labs only consume half the fuel they used to. They consume half a unit of fuel instead of an entire unit of fuel per second. So that is a big, big deal. Chem's a huge source of money that both players are ignoring for the time being. Soren continuing to make those purchases into Cubit. He really wants to end this game before Cubit has the ability to take an advantage off of this off-world market he has constructed. But now that the off-world market is online, let's go ahead and investigate. Food and oxygen both worth ridiculous amounts of money off-world at this stage of the game. And that off-world, it's going to be protected for quite some time, already covered by a goon squad, and Soren has committed to purchasing an EMP earlier 10 more seconds until he has the ability to grab up anything else. So we'll really have to see what he does to respond to this Offworld, and if he can manage to finish off Cubit before Cubit manages to buy into buy into Soren's stock and keeps raising his price higher and higher. Soren still stuck on HQ level 4, has not made the push to level 5 yet, even though that should have become much cheaper for him at this point, since steel is now $27 instead of $100. Alright, 20,000 on the auction. Ooh, Soren actually going to go ahead and try and take that for 24. Very unlikely Cubit will push to 28. He's going to be very worried about his debt right now. Cubit, interestingly enough, moving into electronics production, perhaps forgetting about that change to fuel, and choosing instead to commit fully to electronics. A bit of an interesting decision, considering his opponent is in a patent lab and has been consuming chemicals. We saw Soren go ahead and grab up teleportation for himself earlier. And Soren is going to be the one to make that chem move. These should be some of the most lucrative tiles on this map. We can see almost 200 per tile in the chem labs, as opposed to 64, 65, 63 for these electronics, consuming a large amount of carbon with not a lot of carbon production down for Cubit. We'll have to see how this really pans out for him long term. Especially his opponent already has the patent lab down, can maybe move into carbon scrubbing, and ignore that high carbon price for his own chem labs if he desires. There was what was that? An underground nuke onto Cubit's Offworld market. A good move by Soren, generally speaking. We can see there is a little bit of carbon under that tile, allowing it to be nuked. Soren, knowing that a nuke turned against him will not have a lot of success, it will not affect him heavily at all, so he chooses to just commit the nuke in order to blast through the goon squad and try and hit it with a dynamite or a mutiny later. Solid way to counter an Offworld market. It looks like Cubit has committed to another Offworld market. He is relying on surviving for a significant period of time to get an advantage off of both of these, but he's done that quite well so far. We can see he has fought back against Soren, forcing Soren to commit to purchasing his own stock, and still managing to secure 5 of Soren's stock for himself. So Cubit's about halfway to finishing off this game. Soren with a significant advantage in stock count, but Cubit with a significant advantage in stock price. We're going to have to see how all of that plays out this game, but Cubit, once again, he's pushed to HQ level 5. He is an expansive player, so he is using the large number of tiles he has access to very effectively. And on top of that, he's got 2 Offworld markets. And look at food and oxygen's price. How ridiculous is that? Almost $700 for oxygen. I almost never see an Offworld price this high. Almost $600 for food. That's absolutely fantastic. And on top of that, Cubit is making a strong buy into this carbon shortage. He hasn't turned off his electronics factories yet. A bit of a misplay in response to the shortage there. These factories, we can see carbon very, very high price. But it's not going to matter because the Offworlds are going to go ahead and carry him through. GG. Strong play out of Cubit there. Strong play out of Cubit for game number 1. Not sure why we had the Clark and Asimov nonsense in the way, guys. I had Masquerade turned off. I'm like 100% sure of that. So maybe just a little bit of a glitch in the system. Once again, it's called Beta 3 for a reason, right? There are going to be issues. Cubit actually purchasing a large amount of carbon that game. Not entirely sure about the electronics move. As we talked about, chems might have been a little bit stronger. May have been better to prepare for some farms in response to driving food's price up with his Offworlds, but the Offworld commitment is what's going to carry him through and allow him to easily win that game. Getting 4 Offworld launches for a value of $265,000 is absolutely incredible. Wonderful amounts of income for Cubit there. We can see he was less successful on world than Soren was. No big surprise. Soren didn't push to HQ level 4, and so that was a lot of resources he did not have to spend to get to that high level of production, but we can see it ended up biting him in return because he made the push and he failed. He fell short. He could not finish the game. And when you've made a push like that and you aren't invested properly into the future of the game, then you're gonna just fall short. Also, perhaps a bit of a misstep out of Soren. We saw him go for a patent lab, which indicates, okay, I'm aiming for a bit of a longer term scenario where I can make good use of this building, I can get some patents out, and the game will last long enough so that I can take an advantage off of them, but then also trying to cut the game short by going into his opponent's stock. Maybe if we had not seen him make the commitment and the investment into the patent lab, if that tile had been making money instead of consuming it, then maybe he could have made the push a little bit better and he would have stepped forward and won the game. Alright guys, that's going to mostly cover it for game number 1. We can see we've got a little bit better black market screen at this point. We can see that Soren purchased 8 black market effects and Cubit purchased 8 black market effects. A lot of claims coming out for Cubit. This is very, very standard Cubit play from what we've seen. Deviates a bit from other players at that tip-top level where Cubit very, very highly values these claims. He is confident in his ability to outlast his opponent and take a benefit off of them, allowing himself to kind of eat power surges, and EMPs as the game continues on, and just continue to develop himself and outthink his opponent in the long term. Whereas Soren getting a bit more aggressive, only 1 new claim purchase, 2 goon squads. A little bit concerned about getting attacked at times. And then just 1 mutiny, 1 underground nuke, 2 power surges, and an EMP. Just a bit more aggressive than Cubit was that game. Alright, well with that, let's go ahead and get a move on to game number 2.